Okay, welcome to All Things Psychology, the Bunny Therapy. I'm Dr. Tyson, and today we're going to talk about something I'm very excited about. It's mindfulness, and this has enjoyed a lot of press, a lot of buzz in society. There's a lot of thoughts about it. So I think just to cut to the chase, I'll give you the definition that I've come up with over time, which is bringing awareness and attention to private events, moment by moment, non-judgmentally, in service of achieving our goals and living according to our values. That's in a nutshell. It's a very simple concept, but it's very difficult to do. So for the purposes of a short video, basically what we're trying to do is look at what's happening inside our minds and not manipulate it, because a lot of therapies are going to try and talk you out of your feelings. They're going to try to uncover things. They're going to try to give you tools, try to give you behaviors, and this is a powerful way to get your needs met in life without actually having to try to change your mind. So having said that, let's start out at the beginning. Mindfulness comes from a Buddhist tradition, hence the bunny in the rock garden with the meditation. And some people will say that mindfulness is meditation. It has roots in Buddhism, and there's different views of all that. I came through it through science and research, and some of my research was cited in terms of anxiety and how to deal with that, and how people who try to control or reject anxiety tend to have more of it, and they tend to have more of it more frequently, intensely, and longer. And mindfulness is a way to end that vicious cycle of worry and PTSD and all sorts of things like that, and getting in the way of going on dates, meeting people, enjoying yourself in relationships, enjoying yourself in bed, enjoying yourself in life in general. And it doesn't matter if you have 6 months to live or 60 years to live, mindfulness can help you. I worked at the VA, and a lot of the guys I worked with in a 50-bed residential unit were chronically homeless veterans, and our idea was to try and clean them up, get them their teeth, get them their IDs, get them a job, fix their anxiety, their depression, to end the substance use. And but there was a lot of prison time amongst this particular population of people who spent decades on the street learning to hustle, learning how to get over on people. And they were a tough crowd, and a lot of them just wanted benefits from the government. Thank goodness many of them were well-intentioned and wanted to just do better in life, but some people, they have a lot of criminal backgrounds, they have a lot of different ways of learning to adapt. And so to catch their attention, because, they would roll their eyes at a lot of therapy stuff, because these guys are, they're pretty street savvy. And they've seen some things. Beyond war, they've just seen things. Interestingly enough, I've had guys come back from Vietnam and survive combat, and only to get injured when they move back to their cities that they're from. And there's parts of Newark, New Jersey that are really rough and tumble. And I swear that if I'm driving through Newark in one of the worst neighborhoods you could possibly find, and my car breaks down and I hop out and I stick out like a sore thumb, there'll be like 100 guys that'll be like, hey, Dr. Tyson, how you been? Because I've worked with them very closely. And what's underneath, speaking of mindfulness, what's really driving all of this isn't necessarily the addiction. It's a well of abuse and shame that they don't want to look at. And the substance use and the sex and all that is a way of distracting themselves. And mindfulness is going to be the exact opposite of trying to distract oneself. At any rate, so the tradition of mindfulness comes through Buddhism. Zen is kind of like a popular way of looking at it. I came through it through science. You can measure it. You can measure control and avoidance of anxiety, in addition to measuring things like depression and substance use and all sorts of things like that. And more recently, I bought this letter about the founding of psychoanalysis written by Freud in 1908. And he's writing it to a contemporary, and he mentions Carl Jung and Bleuler. Bleuler's where we get autism from, and a bunch of other interesting concepts, because they were all trying to look at the unconscious mind and what's going on inside of there. And that was 1908. And in Japan, there was this guy named Morita, like Pat Morita from the Karate Kid. And he was saying, like, okay, I've got an idea. Instead of like what Freud was doing, which was looking at like different psychosexual stages in life, the oral phase, the anal phase, and all the stuff like that, the Oedipus complex, and this really just grand sweep of ideas, terrible science, but grand sweep of ideas. And his contemporary was this guy in Japan. Now, when I was studying for the New York license exam for clinical psychology, I was taking a practice test, and one of the questions was, this form of therapy tries not to manipulate the symptom, but try to embrace it, to get some wiggle room and try and change your life. And I'm like, oh, I know what that is. That's ACT, Acceptance and Commitment Therapy, ACT, ACT. Which was championed by Stephen Hayes at the University of Nevada at Reno, and a great researcher. But much like Freud, the ACT protocol, which is really popular right now, includes a lot of bells and whistles that I think are helpful, much like Freud. But I think the thing that's driving it the most is basic mindfulness from Morita. A lot of people think that mindfulness is meditation, and meditation comes in many forms. And but for the Zen and for the ACT and for this purposes of this video and for therapy, what we're trying to do is we're just trying to observe the show that's going on inside of our heads. And I'm going to go into detail as to why that show in our heads cannot be trusted any more than an eyewitness testimony or memory. And those are other conversations to be had. But the idea then for meditation and mindfulness in general, that's why there's a little confusion about what it is sitting down and following the breath. Now, most Americans can't go with 3 breaths without following the instruction of, like, whatever you do, just sit there and breathe in, breathe out, and that's it. Just follow your breath. Now, most Americans can't go 3 breaths without their minds just drifting away, because that's the way the mind works. It's like a waterfall. Imagine each little inner experience, whether it's a memory, an urge, or a physical pain, or an itch, or a thought, or a dream. Imagine each one of those like mental events as a little drop of water, and they're falling down and they're creating a big waterfall. And I don't know if you've ever been to like a water park or a swimming pool where they have like kind of like a mini waterfall available, but if you stand in it, it's really overwhelming because the rush of the water comes down and you really can't see anything. You really don't get a sense of what's going on around you. All you know is that you're just overwhelmed by all of this mental events, the water, right? And what we want to do is we want to take a step back and just watch the flow. And so there was this one veteran who didn't like the federal government. His name is Paul Anshin, and he has the Zaltho Foundation, and he was a Vietnam vet. And he was traumatized in Vietnam, and well-meaning people gave him medication. He became addicted to opiates, came back to the U.S. after Vietnam, and became addicted to opiates. He resented, the status of the veterans at that time. They were mistreated, they were neglected. If you wanted to prove anything about PTSD and be compensated, then you had to prove you were at exact location at an exact time, and prove your case to get compensation for the government, because the government's supposed to leave you the same way they found you, which is not true. Now for hepatitis C, because these guys going to Vietnam, they would get like hepatitis C vaccinations, except for they had like basically this gun of injectors. Some people would go down like an assembly line and they would like hit them with this like thing, except for the problem is that everybody who got injected had a little piece of blood in there, and they spread hepatitis C all over with all of these veterans. So it became this big part of fixing the veterans. But it took a long time for something like PTSD to be recognized and helped. And today, making up for this losses of or the sins of Vietnam, you don't really have to go through all that trouble to prove that you have PTSD, that you're at a certain place. You basically file the paperwork, and the government is highly motivated to recompensate you, which is why back, like 10 years ago, people were complaining about the Department of Defense and the VA, saying that there's this long wait time. Well, everybody came out with a claim, and the backlog was enormous. And for each one, we have to submit the documents from the Department of Defense to the VA, and I review it, and then I do my assessment of them, and then I make my recommendations. And these folders are really amazing, like the World War II guys. You see the original stuff written in pencil with like these battlefield typewriters that are about this big, and it's pretty intense. So at any rate, I'm drifting away from the main topic, but this guy who was traumatized in Vietnam, he had PTSD, and he would go into grocery stores and pick up the can of peaches thinking it was booby-trapped. He would have a flashback. His brain was telling him that the peaches were dangerous when the peaches were not dangerous at all, and he would freak out. And then he discovered Zen Buddhism, which gave him what he called steadiness in his unsteadiness, and he became ordained a Zen monk, where the Traxpo in I think it was Auschwitz, where he walked to Vietnam, and he studied with monks there in Buddhism, and he carried 10 pounds of packages not packages, but his belongings. And he would stop at houses of worship and say, I'm a Zen monk, I need a simple meal and a place to sleep. And now he has a foundation where he goes around the world by invitation, teaching people how to cope with violence and how to deal with PTSD, and teach them mindfulness. And our guys, who were a bunch of, they weren't Boy Scouts, they were street tough guys in this unit that I worked at the VA, they listened to this guy. They really paid attention, and he came in, and I had the benefit of learning from him. And I taught classes in mindfulness there, and it went over really well, and it was highly effective at helping these traumatized veterans and substance abusing veterans. And so every Friday, me and my buddy would go up there to teach class, and we would ask them what mindfulness was, because it's becoming popular enough that people say, well, it's about being aware of your surroundings. And through this process, I honed the definition to bringing awareness and attention to private events, moment by moment, non-judgmentally, in service of accomplishing our goals and living according to our values. And I think that's probably the best definition out there. So let's take the first part, which is bringing awareness and attention. That's what all those monks are doing, that when they're staring at a blank wall for hours and hours and hours, and what they're doing is meditating. They're trying to follow the breath, and so they'll notice that their minds drift. They'll have private events. They'll have urges like itches. They'll have hunger pains, they'll have thoughts. Their mind will automatically drift off. And the idea is to catch it and then come back to the center and follow your breath again. And then 3 breaths later, your mind is off to like the work tomorrow, or your mind is off to a nightmare, or whatever it is that your mind is telling you. Your mind will automatically drift. It's always moving like the little ticker tape at the bottom of a news channel. Your mind is constantly like the waterfall, bringing bits of information from your mind to your consciousness and outside of consciousness. And the idea then is to bring awareness and become really aware of it. We don't want to distract. You'll find that a lot of therapies will try and teach you distraction or relaxation, and that's a trap, because we can't relax our way out of it. We can't distract our way out of it. Distraction works great for the short term. Like, if I go to get my blood drawn at the hospital, I don't look at the needle. I don't sit there and be like, oh, this is really interesting. I distract myself temporarily till it's done. But that's no way to live life. So like temporary pain, I'm not going to bang you up for not paying attention to that. But if you have chronic pain, you need to pay attention to that private event, which is pain. So we're going to bring awareness and attention. We're going to focus in on what's going on from this side of the skin from inside your body, only things that you can see. Now, there's a difference between private events and public events. If I'm walking down the street, someone can see me do that. But if I imagine a number between 1 and 10, you don't know what it is. Do you have an idea? I always pick the same number. It's 4. And my 4 in my head is purple for some reason. I don't understand why. But that's a private event, and I want to bring attention and awareness to that private event. It's nothing that anybody in the world can see except for me. It's something that's going on inside my mind. So examples of private events, we want to bring awareness and attention to these private events. Well, what are these private events? They're, obviously memories, like the thinking bunny, right? The thinking, that's cognition, that's thinking. That's one kind of private event. There's itching. One of the meditations we do is follow the itch. And if you just sit there, your body's an itchy place, and all of a sudden your body will come up with these little itches that'll come and go. I'm having one right now on my nose. But there's no real reason for it. It's just something my mind is serving up. I'd like to think it's on my nose, but it's coming from my mind. Or maybe some nerve innervations inside my nose, but those nerve innervations go to my head and tell me to scratch, right? So there's memories, there's thoughts, there's emotions. The emotions are really, really important, because a lot of times we have uncomfortable emotions. We don't want to avoid them, and we avoid them, and we do so at our own peril. So there's like hunger, there's hunger pains, there's physical pains, there's urges, there's thoughts, there's memories, there's dreams, there's emotions. All of these things are things that only happen in your mind. So we want to bring awareness and attention to private events moment by moment. Now, it's funny, at a Thanksgiving thing, there was a family gathering, and this 5-year-old or 4-year-old, I forget what his name, he really wanted to participate, and he wanted to do this ritual of blessing the food before all the people ate the food, because the thought is that improves things somehow and ensures safety spiritually or something like that. You come from your own traditions, but in this particular event, it was to sort of bless the food and make it like healthy and safe and delicious and stuff. And so the kid volunteered for it, and we said, okay, go ahead, you can say the prayer. And he folds his hands and he closes his eyes, and then he goes quiet, and we're like, aren't you going to start? And he opens up his eyes from the prayer, and he goes, what, you guys don't hear that? And I thought that's really interesting. He's having private events. So we want to bring awareness and attention to private events moment by moment. And what do I mean by moment? Now, this might sound really hippy-dippy, but what we have is only now. Like, so when you're meditating and your mind drifts, you're drifting off to a past or a future or something but you're not paying attention to what's happening right now, which is the instruction, right? To follow your breath, right? That's the imperative when you're doing this form of meditation. But you know what's really interesting is that we have memories of the past, but there really is no past. We have recollections of the past. We can see things that look like they came from the past, but in reality, all we have is right now. And there's a huge power in bringing ourselves back to this awareness that right now is all we have. Yes, there's a future. Probably the sun will come up. Probably I will go to work. Probably all these things will happen. But in my advanced placement English class, one of the teachers said, when we were analyzing some sort of literature about the future, like he said, there's no guarantee. Oh, we were in a temporary building in the parking lot because the school didn't have enough room inside the school. So we were in this temporary building in the parking lot. So between our building, there was a bunch of cars in the parking lot, and then there was the school. And he said, there's no guarantee you're getting back to that school alive after this class. And he's right. We don't know the future. We make up the future. We sometimes get absorbed into worry about the future, and we think about this future that doesn't exist. It's a fantasy. There's no guarantee that we're going to live to the end of the day. There's no guarantee that we're going to live to 100 years. There's no guarantee that we won't invent robots and live for 10,000 years. Who knows? All we have is right now, and that might sound hippy-dippy, but there's only now. There is no past. There is no future. There is only now. So we want to bring awareness and attention to these private events moment by moment, and we want to do so non-judgmentally. And this is something that I wrestle with all the time with my clients, is that, these private events are neither good nor bad. They're like, the colors are neither good nor bad. We might have a preference for a color, but we need the whole palette. If we're going to paint our lives with the colors on the palette, we need all of them to create a beautiful picture, whether or not we like the color or not. So our private events are neither good nor bad. And the reason why we say non-judgmentally is because we're socialized to think of as love is good and hate is bad, and that feeling full is good and being hungry is bad. You live a longer life when you're hungry. Hunger is just a signal that tells you that you need more nutrition, you need more water to stay alive. You do all this to bring nutrition to your brain, and your brain can do things to help you get more food, more water, and heal yourself and take care of yourself and live the life that you want to. So we're taught that like pain is bad, anxiety is bad, love is good, pleasure is good, and all of that stuff. And what we want to do, because that's a valence, it's positive and negative, like a battery. There's a positive side and a negative side. Well, our private events are not like that. They're just things our brains do to keep us alive. And consciousness is a strange thing, but we have private events. And we don't want to judge them as good or bad. We want to describe them instead. So if I have a pain, I worked in a pain clinic. We don't say, do you have good pain or bad pain? We say, okay, can you rate it from 0 to 10? And we have little smiley faces or crying faces. Is the pain pins and needles? Is the pain burning? Is the pain throbbing? So we're describing the pain. We're not calling it good or bad. We're just trying to figure out what's going on. And so, if we avoid something, it doesn't work. If we try to avoid our anxiety, it doesn't work. If we try to avoid our depression, it doesn't work, and it sticks around longer, it gets more intense, and it happens more often. All of the things that people are judging as bad, they try and make it go away, and at best, it doesn't work. What more often happens is that it comes back more frequently and more intensely, and so, a memory might be painful, but it's not bad. A dream might be scary, but it's not bad. Is pain bad? Pain is there to keep your body in physical condition. So if I put my finger on the stove and I burn it, because I never learn them when I'm cooking, I always grab something hot. I should just grab my gloves that I've got, but I'm having trouble learning from my mistakes. And if I grab it and I get a little burn, is that bad? Well, everybody can see that my finger's burned. That's a public event. The private event is the burning, throbbing pain that is temporary, but it's there for a reason. The pain is there to keep me alive and well. It is neither good nor bad. It's something our bodies do to get by. Some people like pain. Do Mexican children like peppers? No, they're human beings. They don't like peppers. But over time, they learn to mix it into their food, and that the intensity, the sharpness of the flavors that accentuate the food are experienced as pleasurable. Now, pleasure is neither good nor bad. Pleasure is something that is quite helpful sometimes. But sometimes pleasure can take us off the road to places we don't want to go. And it's a great way to avoid other unpleasant private events. So if we're going to describe sadness, we can call it, wistfulness. We can call it depression. We can call it bereavement. We can call it all sorts of things. Our anxiety, it can be a panicky feeling. It can be a worried feeling. Is anxiety bad? No, anxiety is not bad. Now, I would like to show you the graph of the optimal level of performance where, if we have too much anxiety, like say you're going to throw the winning free throw shot in basketball, or you're going to give a speech, or you're going to get in front of a camera and give a video. If you're really anxious and fall apart, well, your performance is going to be very, very low, because you're gonna fall apart. You're gonna just throw, you're gonna shake and you can't throw the ball, or you're not gonna be able to concentrate when you're doing your speech. A lot of people get anxious and worry about how they're doing, and they get lost from the situation at hand, and their performance goes down. Likewise, if there's an absence of anxiety, something's really wrong. You go out there to throw the game-winning shot, and you're like, yeah, I got this, I don't care, and you just throw it up there. Well, your performance is going to be low because you're too confident. You think I got this speech ready, I don't need to prepare, I'm just going to go out there and do it and wing it. Well, your performance is going to go down. But if you go into kind of a mid-range of anxiety, we call it the optimal level of anxiety, where it's neither low anxiety nor high, neither low performance but there's a high performance with just the right amount. There's this loop of anxiety that peaks, and the performance is right here in the sweet spot where you're anxious, you're on point, you're ready, you're motivated, you're oriented. And there's a difference between fear, which is when the bear is going to eat you, and your body goes into a panic mode and survival mode, and you run. Anxiety is not about that. Anxiety is about anticipating a terrible future that hasn't happened yet. So anxiety can keep us on point, so that if we bring awareness and attention to that private event anxiety, then we can move on to the next part, which is accomplishing our goals. And, one thing about private events that I'd like to go into briefly is that, people say that if you, just do a quick Google of mindfulness, they'll talk about being aware of our surroundings. Well, our senses are inputs of private events. Let's take vision, for example, because I'm trying to make you very curious about this internal experience that you take for granted. Eyewitness testimony is terrible because of our memories. Our memories are reconstructions, summaries of what happened. Our eyesight is something really unusual. We just assume that what our minds are telling us is what we see. Well, if you're looking at this on a phone or a TV or whatever medium, the light coming from that or the light bouncing off the walls from the sun or anything like that. It's going into your retina, which is a circle, and it gets turned upside down. So the image that you're seeing is actually upside down on the back of your eye. And then it goes into these little radiation detectors, rods and cones, and there's pigments. So the light goes in there and it gets absorbed in there. And then it actually can tire out like parts of the eye. So if like you're looking at something red too long, it'll tire it out. And you can get an after image, and you can look at the wall, and something that's green will appear red. I believe that's the way it works. But if just go on YouTube and look up after image, and then stare at an image. It's like a blue face, and then if you look at a white wall and blink, you'll see it in the appropriate colors, because your brain is actually just sending signals back, but they're flawed because the radiation detectors got tired. And what happens is, like, at the end of each one of these little radiation detectors at the back of your eyes, where you're seeing everything upside down, and I think it's the rods see light and dark. It was funny when I would come home from college, and if my family was away, I'd sleep in my sister's bed because I didn't live there anymore, and she had those like little stars on the ceiling. And I became very alarmed and worried, because every time I looked at these like faint stars in the dark on her ceiling that she had put up there for decoration, they disappeared. Because what happens is, like, those particular light and dark receptors are around the periphery of your vision, or on the side. And if you look at it directly, then now the light's hitting your fine, the macula of your eyes, the one that detects sharpness and color, and it disappears. So anyway, at the end of these little radiation detectors at the back of your eyeballs, a little nerve comes out, and then they all cluster at one spot on the back of each eye. So they all kind of converge in one spot in the back of your eye, and they follow like this little fiber optic cable thing to the back of your eyes where you see, right? And what's really fun, and I hope I can be mindful enough to, that's a different kind of mindfulness, if I can remember well enough to include an image of the blind spot. And this is something you can do with a piece of paper. If you draw an X over here and X over here, close one eye, and then follow this X and move the paper, the other finger will hit that spot where all the little nerve bundles are in the back of your brain. And it's actually blind there. There's no vision, and that finger will disappear. That little X on the paper will disappear from your vision. Now, you don't see it because our brains fill it in. It's not just like one eye is filling it in for the other eye. With your eye closed, that will disappear because you don't see it there, and your brain makes it up, and then it goes to the back. And there's this one guy, speaking of Vietnam, who had a head injury, and so he couldn't see anymore. But the back of his eyes worked just fine. It was just the part back here. This is the vision center, the occipital lobe. This is where it processes all the data from the radiation detectors and memories. And, like when you're sleeping, you can see stuff in your dreams. But this is just like your brain coming up with it. And so he couldn't see because he got shot in the head. And they would put this big white screen in front of him, and they would shine a light up there and wiggle it around. And they would say, "Okay, where's the light?" And he's like, "You jerks, I can't see. And they're like, "Just point where you think it is." And they can point to it because there's a really old part of the brain outside of the higher up processing part that's capable of detecting motion and light that he can't see, but it's there, and he can find it. It's really interesting. So what else about seeing? There's it's called blind sight. There's the after images, there's things upside down, there's the pigment, and that's just your eyes. So what your brain is telling you, this guy, William Herschel, he was like this scientist a long time ago. He was studying light. And, our eyes only detect a small part of the electromagnetic spectrum. So he was studying this, and he had like a rainbow that he made from white light. And he put a thermometer in each one to measure the heat of each light in the rainbow. And he put one off to the side, just sort of to control it, to see like what the temperature was. And all of a sudden, this one just went off crazy with heat. And he's like, what's going on? And then he realized what it was infrared. Like when you open the car, like it's been closed and it's like, really hot. That's because the light can come in, it gets absorbed, but if the wavelength that comes out can't leave the car. It gets trapped inside by the glass and you feel heat. Well, this is what was going on. He was putting that thermometer just to the right of the red and it was infrared. And then all of a sudden he realized, wow, there's stuff happening that we can't see. And that's just your sight. So you don't have to believe what you see. Your hearing, just like eyesight, you can only hear certain things. Other animals can hear things you can't hear. There's stuff going on out there. You think you hear it, but you can't. We can hear some things. Some people hear things that aren't there. And, like most people hear voices or something like that. It's most often like deceased loved ones, but people will hear things that aren't there. There's a whole society, by the way, for hearing voices. And is hearing voices good or bad? No. Schizophrenia, they have hallucinations, and it doesn't sound like the voice inside your head. It sounds like someone else's voice talking to you. That's neither good nor bad. The absence of, the disruption and the disease, that's detrimental to our health. But the voices themselves are not bad. And my friend who did ACT research would interview these people. And some people would judge them to be bad and be like, I hate this, And other people would be like, my brain just does that. And they were at peace, right? There's and tasting and smelling. I forget which one. You can only taste or smell something dissolvable in fat, but there's only certain things you can taste or smell. Sharks. If you I think I saw this on Mythbusters. They wanted to test a theory that bags full of peppers would make sharks go away. Well, sharks can bite the peppers. They don't feel a thing. They're perfectly fine with it. There's also feeling, and some people who have had limbs removed, they have phantom limbs, and they feel things that are not there. And there's this one person who had a phantom limb that, the arm was removed, but they could feel the hand still there, even though it's not there, and it was tight in a fist. And it really hurt, even though the hand doesn't exist. So they put a mirror down them. So they'd say, okay, lift up your hand. And then in the mirror, they saw the other hand. They said, okay, now make a fist. And then he made a fist. And he let it go. And then the phantom limb let go. So I do all of this to try and make you aware that your mind is a place that doesn't reflect reality. It's a gross distortion, a gross approximation of what's out there. And we want to bring awareness and attention not just to our senses, but to our thoughts, our feelings, our dreams, and we don't want to avoid them. Because if we do, then the unwanted, unhelpful events that's going on in our mind, like depression, like anxiety, like nightmares, all this stuff, and some of it's out of control. Some people have these really disturbing dreams of over and over again that they keep secret from their lovers, of betrayal or murder or all sorts of violent stuff and sexy stuff. And if you look at what your brain conjures up when you're asleep, it's a strange place. But some people are having recurring nightmares that bother them. And usually if I sit down with them and we really explore what it is that they're dreaming about, they don't want to talk about it. As soon as they do, the dreams disappear. Because you make contact with them and the frequency, intensity, and duration of it goes down. And if you're able to look at your brain as just creating dreams and it's not real and it's not dangerous, then you're fine. Panic disorder, people feel like they're dying. Now, it's easy for me to say that to you, that it feels like, oh my goodness, I feel like I'm dying. But when you actually feel like you're dying, it's terrifying. But panic is completely harmless. Now, that's different than stress. Stress can be very problematic. And if we become more mindful, we change our relationship to our stress, and the stress can go down, which can make your body healthier. And then you can go to the doctor, and the doctor can do tests on you, and now he can look publicly at what's going on, but it starts out privately with the stress, and then it becomes manifested in your body, and then people can see it. They can see that you're upset, they can see you're worried, they can see you're tired, they can measure your blood pressure, they can measure your skin response. And so, a lot of people really want to make things go away. And, medication, thank goodness for medication, because people with like schizophrenia and bipolar, they're having all sorts of crazy private events. And by crazy, I mean crazy, meaning psychotic. And these medications can relieve those, but they come with side effects. Now, for things like anxiety, sleep, and depression, depression can kill you if you kill yourself, but it's a tricky way to engage depression. I had a client who had chronic pain, and he was depressed, and he called his depression like a sine wave. Like, this is a nice visual too, I hope I can do. But like, the wave goes up and down, and when he's on the crest of the wave, he can see where he was, and he can see the future, and he can see what's coming next. But when he's in the deep trough of there, it's a dark place, the vision is limited, and it looks like it's going to stay that way forever. And that's part of the cognitive triad of depression. The future is hopeless. Now, in the moment, it's hopeless. And it's really hard to sit with someone who's depressed, because that's all they know, and that's the way it seems like it's forever. But it's not, because your mind is constantly changing. Sometimes your sadness is lower, sometimes it's higher, sometimes it's gone. And the more mindful you are, the less frequently, less intense, frequency, intense, and duration will diminish in the depression if you do it right. That said, some people really require medication to get a hand up, because there's a limit to therapy, but there's also a limitation to the medication, and taking the medication doesn't give you all the things you need to navigate your life, because you still have problems, you're still going to have anxiety, you're still going to have challenges. So we just want to observe what's going on inside of our heads, because it gives us choices. If we sit there and buy into the idea that what's the point of doing things, or like, oh, I'm tired, tiredness is bad, so I'm not going to go to the gym. Well, I've got news for you in a motivational video we'll do later. Thinking is going to get in the way of you doing what you need to do, because you're just going to get sucked into this waterfall of thoughts, and you're not going to put one foot in front of the other and go to the gym. One of the hardest things to do is to not do something, like not eat, or not drink, or not smoke. Now, like, if people quit smoking, their bodies do all sorts of things to clean themselves up. Like, it starts eliminating poisons from the blood, and you start your brain chemistry is changing, so there's sleep disturbance, and there's difficulty concentrating, and there's irritability. Now, are all of these private events bad? No. It's just something that happens when your brain and body readjust from poisoning yourself. And if you can accept those, then it changes everything. If you call it bad and terrible, then you'll move from just pain into suffering, and suffering's all the stuff we put on top of the pain. But if we can sit there, we can watch the wave of the difficulty concentrating, the wave of the irritation, the wave of the hunger. And if you sit with it, it passes. They call it urge surfing in act, right? Like, you want to have that smoke, you want to smoke that cigarette so that the pain dissipates. Well, then you're stuck smoking. But if you can ride the urge, it tends to pass, it'll come back, and over time it comes back less intensely and less frequently, and pretty soon you're a non-smoker, or you're not binge eating, or you're going to the gym, because like going to the gym, you're lifting up stuff, and it can be painful. Is that pain bad? No, it's what happens when your muscles start tearing themselves apart, rebonding, becoming stronger, and releasing stuff into your blood. And some people like the sore feeling, some people don't. But we don't want to judge it as good or bad. Personally, I enjoy going to the gym and feeling that feeling. You know, I'm like, oh, I did something. I'm living according to my values. So we want to bring awareness and attention to private events, moment by moment, non-judgmentally, in service of living according to your values and accomplishing your goals. And I don't care what your values are. I would say this to our guys who were not Boy Scouts. And I would say, if you want to defraud the federal government of getting money, mindfulness will help you. You want to shoot a better basketball? Mindfulness will help you. You want to give a better speech? Mindfulness will help you. You want to stop smoking? Mindfulness will help you. You want to stop worrying in bed at night? Because when you're in the bed, you start trying to think about things and what it is, an avoidant function to try and figure out a problem. Like maybe you're going to go to the boss tomorrow and have a conversation and ask for a raise, or maybe you're worried that like your credit card's going to bounce, or like the payment on your credit card's going to bounce, or maybe you're worried that thing on your leg is cancer, or maybe whatever it is that in the future that hasn't happened yet. Because remember, anxiety has two components. One is there's a threat that hasn't happened yet, and two, that we're vulnerable to it. So like in generalized anxiety, you're sitting in there and you're in your bed and you're trying to figure out a problem about this fictitious future that doesn't exist. What it is you're in your bed and your goal is to sleep. Now, in the morning, you might be able to take some sort of action in the future to address whatever that's bothering you. But if you sit there and you try and avoid that worry by trying to figure it out, you're going to lose sleep and you're going to get more worried. There's a thing called checking behaviors. Like people will, a lot of obsessive people do that. They'll have trouble getting to work because they like, did I leave the sink on? Did I leave the stove on? And they'll go and check on it. I had a client who had a friend who was in a horrible car accident, and anytime someone didn't show up or text or return a call or something in the time frame that they wanted, all of a sudden their anxiety would skyrocket and they would start Googling for accidents, or they'd start reaching out to people, and you're like, you didn't text me back, why is that? And of course they don't get the text, and then all of a sudden the anxiety spikes. And the idea is to just sit with the anxiety and it will pass and they'll get their text. So checking behaviors, be aware of them. You should become aware of, like, when you're trying to check and make sure things are happening because you want the anxiety to go away. It won't work. It's a trap. If you change your relationship to your anxiety through mindfulness, you will find more comfort. Remember, we don't want to call like pleasure good. We don't want to call relaxation good. But you will feel more comfortable. We can say something's comfortable. We can say something's less comfortable. And yeah, like if you become more comfortable, if you change your relationship, if you become more effective at dealing with yourself, we like to think the world is out there. And I've done a really lengthy explanation as to like how what is out there is not what's out there. It's all in here. If you really change your relationship here, then yeah, like the experience you have in the future will change in the direction of accomplishing your goals and living according to your values. And yes, then you will be happy. But that's not the point. The point is to embrace the dark thought, the unwanted urges, the anxieties, the depressive thoughts. Like people who are depressed automatically are going to have suicidal feelings, and we don't want to ignore those. We don't want to avoid. And suicide is the highest form of avoidance because you're dead and you don't experience anything. And if you want to live your life, then you need to do this. And again, I don't care if you're a Catholic or a Muslim or a Protestant or a Buddhist, or if you're an atheist, or if you value boxing, or if you value peace and social justice and trans rights, or whatever it is. Mindfulness will help you do it. Now, there's a whole lot more, but this video is getting long, and I should probably cut it up into shorts, but, you know, oh, by the way, with borderline personality, they have like these shifts in their experience that are rapid, where they devalue and idealize people, and they're really impulsive and volatile, and the mindfulness can help them track those things and help them integrate their experience. And impulsiveness, in many instances, most of the time, is like where something happens inside our minds and we judge it to be so toxic, we discharge it by acting, by impulse, and it's really hard not to act. Like people with gambling problems, they have a hard time not engaging in that behavior, and the idea of losing and walking away, and the fantasy of all of these wealth, this opera that's going into their head drives themselves. And gaming addiction, like, wow, like to step into another person's body, or like go into a different world with a video game, distracting yourself and artificially experiencing these things. Oh, that's another thing, like sports and movies. Our minds, the way our brains work, we kind of put ourselves in the position of those people. So like people who watch sports will get exhilarated and say, we won, when in fact all they did was sit and look at a TV. It's really interesting. Let's go back to the definition of bringing awareness and attention to private events, moment by moment, non-judgmentally, in service of achieving our goals and living according to our values. The point is not to be happy. It's just a lovely side effect of this exercise, which really means embracing every color on the palette to paint that beautiful life. And I'm leaving out so much, but I can talk forever, and that's something that I'm aware of. It's a flaw that I have, and probably not great for a YouTube channel. But rather than get worried or upset about that, I can say, okay, my goal is, I have a message for you, the viewer. I have a message for you to make your life the way you want it to be. And if it gets lost in an hour-long video, well, that's not going to help me accomplish my goals. So what I can do is I can adjust and make them into shorts. I can re-record it. I can revisit it. But I want to end with the paradox of getting happy, of living a more comfortable life, by bringing awareness and attention to our private events, moment by moment, non-judgmentally, in service of accomplishing our goals and living according to our values. And I hope I did a good job of trying to convey that message to you. But lucky for you, it's a video. You can go back and watch it over and over again. Please do. And and if you like what you're seeing here, I'm trying to use this platform to drive people to services and teach them things like mindfulness. So if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, you're not just helping yourself, you're helping me, and you're helping everybody else who is out there that's seeking services and looking for education and empathy and meaning in life. And having said that, that's the bunny in the therapy, and the therapy in the bunny, and all things psychology. And we'll see you next time.